I mean, it strikes me that most people who are sort of critics of religion stress the differences between the religion. Most people you talk to who are religious stress the commonalities.
Yes, that's perfectly correct. I would say, put in a good word for non-religious people. You know, I have many friends who aren't religious and they still have high ethical standards, but it's probably easier if one does have a religious belief to maintain these. Yeah, it's always amazed me. I mean, in particular, of all faiths, Islam and Judaism are actually the closest. If only there would be peace at last, God willing, in the Middle East. You know, so much misunderstanding, so much bad feeling, hopefully would evaporate, you know, perhaps overnight. But certainly in Judaism, particularly in connection with the riots, firstly, obviously, rioting, stealing, burning people out, you know, of course, you know, it's totally wrong. But again, these things don't happen in a vacuum. And the other aspect of Judaism, particularly found in the prophetical writings, is the pursuit of social justice. And that, again, is extremely important. And of course, in Islam, it's the same. We have the same word, or virtually the same, tzedakah. In Judaism, the Hebrew word, it means charity, but it also means justice, and it also is a root word for righteousness, in that in performing charity, one is simply showing, in a classical sense, you know, I mean, nowadays there shouldn't be the need for charity as such, society should be fairer. But in traditional values, to give charity is doing no more than showing justice to the poor, and it's a righteous act.
Martin, you know, Leon made the point there that I guess that you don't have to be religious to be moral, but it helps. But surely in Tottenham, when your friend was killed, people of all religions and none simply made a moral judgment that this is something that they knew to be wrong.
It was wrong, and I think the church, the synagogue, the mosque, the temple, they all have a big part to play in bringing the communities together. I think religion and faith is something wonderful, and people should embrace it, and people should learn from it and learn that wrong is wrong and right is right. And what happened in regards to the riots was wrong. Like, there's people getting burnt out of their homes, losing their business is wrong, and no religion in the world would condone that and be happy for that to happen. So, and specifically in Tottenham as well, there is within the black community, and other communities that share the area do have a strong faith. There's going to be pastors who are going to play a big part in healing the community and bringing people together.
So it's interesting that the impact, the positive impact for the Muslim community, stemmed, I think, very largely out of the reaction of the family and friends of the people killed in Birmingham, and yet that reaction was impressive and had the impact because it was essentially a tolerant reaction. It wasn't a call for an eye. It wasn't a call for revenge. Yet, actually, the government and the media doesn't seem to be able to bring itself to mirror that kind of reaction.
I think with Tariq Jahan's response, we need to, I don't think he can be praised enough, to be honest, because if he hadn't come out with those words of wisdom, and not many of us could have. I mean, I'm a parent, and I'm not sure if I could have, you know, been as eloquent as him and said what he did. And he prevented, I think, many more deaths. And quite easily, Muslims were being demonised anyway, and we could have ended up being demonised further had he said something different. So he really is a true hero. And then we did start to get some positive stories of Muslim communities in the media, and it was surprising because normally they can't bring themselves to actually say anything positive. Normally when Muslims are involved in criminality, our faith is highlighted. When we're representing our country and contributing to society, you know, we're normally labelled as British Asian or British Black. So maybe, you know, it was just such a great an act that they couldn't actually help but mention it. My concern now is that how long will they kind of maintain this positive image of Muslims in the media? Because unfortunately, we contribute in many, many ways at all levels in society, and it's not celebrated enough. And I think Muslim communities themselves as well, we need to celebrate our successes more. For example, recently, Mo Farah, he's a British Somalian Muslim, and he's won a silver in the World Championship. He holds the 5,000, 10,000 records, British and European records, but no one's actually looking at his faith and saying actually a Muslim is representing our country. So I think we need to be better at highlighting our successes. And I know from time to time Muslim organisations do tend to kind of have role models at events, but we tend to keep wheeling out the same role models, if I'm honest with you. And I think there's some powerful stories in our communities, Muslims, men and women, doing amazing things, and their stories are so inspirational and so powerful because they're having to, whether they're becoming scientists or engineers or magistrates or working in the police, they're doing it by actually overcoming two sets of barriers within the community and also barriers in mainstream society.
Martin, just let me ask you about the contrast between the press reaction and the reaction of authority to the deaths in Birmingham and to the death of Mark Duggan. Because in one case, the sympathy was there because the crime had been committed by looters that the press wanted to turn people against. In the case of Mark Duggan, there was a completely different reaction because the killing was done by policemen who the press doesn't, by and large, want to blame for those things. Did that contrast strike you?
It's funny you should say that because the family in particular, they went to the police station peacefully and to obviously look for answers as to what happened because of what the reports of how he had died. And maybe given the chance, someone from the family may have came out in the same way that Tariq came out and spoke, but because of what happened and the riots ensued, well, obviously across the country, they kind of washed over any kind of humility that anybody could have shown. So it happened so quick. But by the time the peaceful protest happened in Tottenham to when the riots happened to when obviously the three boys tragically lost their lives in Birmingham, it was so fast that there was no chance for the family or anybody from the black community to show any humility and try and calm people down. The people did. I think David Lammy came on TV, but on the Sunday morning, but he was probably still in a state of shock as well as to what has happened. I was in a state of shock as to what had happened the previous night as well. So it was easy for the press at that time to just look at it as obviously his riot sparked off what had happened in terms of in the riots in Tottenham and everywhere else, but that wasn't actually the case.
So do you think that's true, that the speed of events, because I mean a very great deal happened in an incredibly short space of time, and do you think that allowed the media to select certain images? I mean, the one that sticks in my memory is the repeated film of the fire in Croydon, and that was then taken to be almost the total experience of the riots. That was what happened. But actually a lot of different things happened. And as I said at the beginning of the programme, the event which started it, the killing of Mark Duggan, was very quickly, marginalised in the whole story.
Yeah, I think they're very quickly. I think they wanted to blame somebody, so the blame kept shifting. I think they chose images that suited them. So one minute they were trying to demonise the police, then they were trying to demonise the rioters, and so it went on. And I think it just took over everything. But I think that crucial moment though was the Tariq Jahan speech, and I don't think we can. I think we need to just keep reminding ourselves with what happened with his speech. But can I actually just make a wider point about morality and religion? And I agree with what you were saying earlier on, that you can have people with no faith and they lead very moral lives, and you can have people who are quite religious and follow a faith and actually are doing lots of wrong things. But I think to maintain morality in a society, you do need a set of guidelines, and that does often come from faith. And I remember when I was at school many, many years ago, and I was being taught Islamic values at home, but at school I was being taught values from the Bible. But now, if you look at what's happening with youth, they are getting a lot of their values or morals, so-called morals, from TV, music, film, adverts, celebrities. And if you look at all the messages that are coming out, for me it's three main messages. It's all about violence, sex and sexism. And that is having a negative impact on society. So I think we're seeing a reverse trend. I think in Muslim societies we are seeing increasing religiosity and a decline in religiosity generally in Britain. But I think religiosity, though, needs to be in moderation, because I think there is a line, you become more religious, you encourage civic participation, morality rises, you're good to your neighbours, you have good internal relations, good relations with other faiths. But I do think you get to a point where if you become too conservative in a particular religion, including Islam, that does lead to, I think, you start undermining women's rights, pride and ignorance kicks in. And these people, I think they like to be ambassadors of Islam, but they actually divide communities internally, but actually divide the wider society with their negative rhetoric of different communities. So I think it's important to actually remember that.
We're moving towards the end of the programme, so just I'm going to ask you all for just a couple of sentences each about the final point. And I guess I'd like a response to this point, really, that all of you have talked about the values of religious belief, of collectivity, solidarity, morality and so forth. But many people would say, well, you know, if you look in the labour movement or the trade union movement, you find many similar values of collectivity over private gain, of standing together, of solidarity and so forth. And that surely is also a picture, it's the attack on those values as well as on the same values expressed religiously, which is the problem.
Yeah, these are universal values. I think the Islamic values, and if you compare, I think you'll find almost everybody will agree with the Islamic values, but it's just that Muslims are being looked upon in a different angle, unfortunately. And that's what a lot of the Islamic scholars are now trying to argue, especially Tariq Ramadan. Especially that's his argument. He said the Islamic values are universal values. There's nothing different. I mean, with the Labour Party, or even with we have a lot in common with the Conservative Party as well. I mean,
okay. I'm going to stop you there, Leon, quickly.
Very quickly, these values are also found particularly in the prophetical writings in what non-Jews call the Old Testament. I would just like to add that Judaism and the Jewish people have been demonized for thousands of years, so I'm tempted to say, welcome to the club.
Yes, universal values, but when you have people in power that are not actually following the moral values, these shared values, who is holding them accountable? The writers, they were punished disproportionately, but we talked about bankers, but how about governments with their policies and practices that allow Western corporations go into poor countries, rob them of their resources, not just oil, but actually fertile land. They're stealing also, and that includes, Western governments, British governments. The only difference between the corporates, the governments, bankers and the writers, one lot are suited and booted, and the others are wearing trainers and jeans.
Like I said before, I think all faiths have a big part to play in healing the community at the minute, and the black community has taken a batter in this particular instance, as have the Muslim community before. And I just think, in terms of all communities, we all pull together and listen to what the youth are saying, and listen and try to address the problems that are out there. I think things will get better.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of the big debate on the riots in English cities. I'd like to thank all my guests and those in the audience for participating. I hope that you have both been enlightened and entertained by the discussion, and we hope to see you again in future programmes discussing current affairs.